Um, Today we'll be starting the food illustration bit. And in the past, we've done a lot of individual fruit and vegetable painting. So today I'm just going to jump into making clusters of food. Since the whole month is dedicated towards recipe illustration, I thought it would be nice to start off with different kinds of compositions so that you can start seeing fruit and vegetables as a presentation. How would you put them together in color, different forms? And again, this is something that you don't just one day wake up to. Composition is something that you have to learn to see and then also learn to make yourself. So the bunch of pictures that I have shared are just simple color compositions of and textures of different vegetables, sometimes vegetables and fruit, and also table settings. This is also a matter of composition, and I'll explain how these compositions work. And we have a slightly tight composition, and then something like this. So, say for example, you want to write the recipe of either a salad or a smoothie, and you want to show all the ingredients. Are Normally what we think of doing is you will draw, maybe you'll start with saying, oh, what color am I? You'll start saying use one apple, use one tomato, use one carrot or two carrots, and you'll start drawing them like we write them. And then a few blueberries, and then some palak. And then you say, take all this and then blend them or whatever. So this starts becoming our standard way of thinking because this is how we write. When we change writing to drawing, there is no top, bottom, or sequence of writing. You could easily just you can easily just illustrate the page very beautifully so that the page looks good. And literally in sections over here, you could write the recipe. And what would be the recipe for something like that, which is just a salad? You could easily just say, take all these, put them in a blender, and blend into submission, put in a tall glass, and drink. That's it. So you don't really need to have too much text, but the illustration can look absolutely smashing. And then, of course, you can take slightly thicker font or whatever and write the name of the recipe this way, or you can write it this way to make it a little more interesting. So the whole focus needs to be about how to make your page look interesting. All right. So one picture here also highlights how you can make an illustration in such a way that the more interesting looking food item is placed in the foreground and given importance. So if you're making a salad with this radicchio and there's other greens, you can keep all of them in the background and paint the more sparkling ingredient in the foreground. So this, I wanted to share this picture for you to start visualizing your recipe in terms of the visual appeal of the ingredients. It's not always the more plentiful ingredient that needs to be the hero of the dish. It's your recipe, it's your illustration. All right, so today we will, over here now. So a few tips about composition. We will be having a class on composition at some point. But what I want you to observe whenever you see photographs of food or even sometimes fashion photographs, which have jewelry or dress or shoes or whatever, is to notice a few things. Oh, a few things about how those elements are. And these headers that I'm giving you, some of them are universal. In every picture you might have that, and some you will just have to figure out if they occur in your picture or not, or if there's anything new. Now, the first thing that we see is usually color. So you'll notice that in this composition, there are divisions of color. You have orange, 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 and it's all distributed across the page, all the orange elements. Then you have a deep red or a purple color. So you have purple here, beets, and then there's strewn around. Then you have, I think these are little radishes. And then you also have this interesting fruit, I don't know what it is, which is cut open so the colors match. Now notice how the colors are almost alternating. They're not all in one cluster. And then interspersed between them, you have green. So you have artichokes, you have a little bit of a green of the cauliflower and the radish greens. And you also have a little zucchini over here. So again, do you see the arrows? Red, green, red, orange. There are very few that are overlapping. Oh, there's one. Here we go. It is a different shade, I would think. Maybe that's also interesting. I think there's yams here, which are brown. So this is what allows the eye to playfully go over and over and over the composition, making it more and more interesting. There's a little pink also over here. So this is color. That's one thing. Then if you see tones, the tones of the colors are also pretty similar. You don't suddenly have a bright green anywhere. The greens are also all muted. They're similar in tone. The red is also not one tomato red. You don't have that kind of red. It's muted. And though the oranges have this one particular orange is really screaming out, there's just one of those. It's pretty far away, and it is surrounded by a white background, which does not then, it separates that from the rest of the composition. So even if it were screaming a color that is very shiny and too attractive or too jhatak, it becomes muted because of the company that it's kept around. Now, I don't even know whether the photographer intended that when he placed this bell pepper onto the white chopping board. But there's a good chance that on the dark surface, it was shining a lot more. On the gray surface, you cut that by adding another element that is also highlighting, which is the chopping board. So the manner in which I am investigating how this composition works is like this. You first do the color, then you do tone, and then...
Aditi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in a photograph like this one particularly, you would realize that the natural color of these fruits is actually quite brighter than what it appears in this photograph. Like the orange capsicum is like a really bright orange, and so are carrots mainly. So has he kind of used the light or dulled the photograph because he wants that particular effect?
No, I don't think he's dulled the photograph. He's just lit it very carefully. The light source comes from here and at a much lower angle. You can tell that because there are very long shadows on everything. So that is one. Second is the backdrop is very dark also. So that also becomes, it kind of absorbs the colors of all the objects from the edges. Okay. that including the shadow that the object casts itself. It's not independent. Now, if this photograph was shot with the light from the top, it would have very sharp shadows right below the object, and then the objects would shine, they would stick out. But in this case, they're not sticking out because the light source is too shallow. It's not at 90 degrees. So I think, I mean, I don't know if the carrots are any brighter. I have seen carrots that are just as drab as this, but the peaches and the Simla mirchi are definitely shining. But that's okay. That creates a nice highlight. So which is the next point now? So we also have certain points of highlight. You have this, and even that is distributed all over. You have this, sometimes in color, sometimes in tone. Even the artichokes are shining a little bit. So that's one. Now, the most important thing that I find in compositions is, and it's probably because it feeds very well into my OCD, is lines. So here is one line. You have a horizontal chopping board sitting exactly perpendicular to the grooves in the table. Then you have things that are at an angle. So you have this chopping board at an angle, this carrot at an angle, these two at this angle, when they could have been in the other direction, these two in this angle. So there is a repetition of angles. Then you have the zucchini at this angle. So they're all more or less in a similar angle. I hardly see anything that is going in the opposite direction. So with all of this, there's hardly anything that's going radically towards the left. And this is a very important part in composition. If you have two elements that are going in two opposite directions, it really clashes too much with the brain. So you have to avoid that. And also you'll notice, I'm just going over the same lines again in yellow. They somehow seem to be radiating from the same point, at least to this extent over here. And then from this point, the next ones would radiate like this, if this were to extend further. So there is a very nice flow to how you should place objects. Okay. Now, beyond this, there will be texture, distribution of texture all over the place. There could be elements like spoons and knives. Where would you add those? How the shine of that metal makes a difference to the composition. All those things are additional. And it's just about you investigating how it will work for your composition. I had found this the most difficult thing to learn. But if we take into just these 3 or 4 points, color, placement, and angles of things, we are pretty much in good space. Oh, wait, one more thing is spacing between the objects. That's also very important. When I saw some illustrations of the participants in the past, what I found is that the negative space between objects is not given too much importance or even attention. So I'll just show you that quickly. Okay, so look at the spacing. Let's just observe this. You have space, this space here, this space here. So spacing between objects. There is some kind of equal spacing, the distance between the beets and the carrots and the radishes and whatever this fruit is. So there is some thought given to it. And if you have a little less space, that's unfortunately, that's never a problem. If you have more space, there is usually a problem. Now, I find that this area on the left could also have been covered with some fruit or another. I might have put in maybe 1 or 2 peaches in this area. So I would have liked to finish this somewhat like that. And then there would be no tension. But now, although everything else is filled up, there's one corner over here which is so well lit that has nothing. It almost seems a mistake. So this is what happens when you have too much space. Then sometimes you will overlap in one section and then forget to overlap in another section. Like you might overlap over here, keep the objects very well over here. And then this part there'll be too much space and go beyond. And then this would be just about drawn so much. So it makes absolutely no sense. Cutting the picture also. If you cut it off like that, it changes the balance in the picture. So spacing between objects, negative space, treatment of negative space is the next thing that you need to look for. Okay, now this will come to you the more you illustrate. You will be able to see all of these factors little by little, and you might also come up with some of your own, which I welcome you to do. There should be a personal understanding of all these concepts. So we are going to illustrate the last image. The one that I think is a recipe for a smoothie. Looks quite delicious. Okay, so here we are going to illustrate it. We can illustrate it exactly the way it is, but I'm going to so I'm going to show you how we can create a backdrop that is interesting. I don't think we'll be successful in getting this chipped paint effect. That's very difficult, and we won't be able to do this in class. But at least some kind of backdrop we can make. Then colors, shadows, highlights, and how to paint greens. That's what I'm going to show you. The style is going to be fairly casual, not too formal, because I want you to enjoy making the illustration look like an illustration. You don't want to make an illustration to look like a photograph. If that was your intention, then go click a photograph. So the lines need to be nice and fun and easy. That will make the illustration look much better in the book. So like we normally do, just to think up of how this composition works, starting off with figuring out the dimensions of our picture. This is our square, looks like the rectangle is 1.5 times longer, or the 1.5 times the width of the box, or maybe slightly more. Then make a grid, and then you will know how everything stays. See that all the carrots are gently radially changing their direction. Don't suddenly make a carrot that goes in the opposite direction. The position of these is also very cute. You have tomato, apple, 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 tomato, tomato. And there's a very nice, again, same lines in those, pointing in the same direction, more or less. You don't have an odd tomato over here and then one apple over here. So nothing is pointing towards the left. So it's fairly simple. We should be able to do this quite easily. And then I'll show you how to paint these elements, like a bowl full of berries. How can that be illustrated quickly? Okay. Sorry, I don't know what's happening today. Okay, so first of all, to make a nice casual illustration, make your lines very light in the beginning. measure with either a brush or a pen. You can use the same pencil if you want to. This is the this is where we can get a square. And now identify the point, the half point of this length, and extend the line further by just that much. So we are going to draw a rough guideline of these fruit and vegetables in pencil, and then we will draw a very casual lined illustration in pen, and then we will paint it. So here now divide it into 3 parts. Nandini, are you doing okay? Do you have any questions so far? Okay. Now I'm just drawing lines as to indicate where I want the carrot. So this can be the left side of every carrot. You don't have to often draw the whole thing, just to indicate where it's going to be. And then when we come and make it in pen, we can furnish the remaining details. I think I can make this slightly narrower. Here's the spinach, and here's the carrot greens. So whenever you're drawing in pencil, you really don't need to make all the lines, especially if you are then going to illustrate them in pen or maybe even ink. Don't spend more than 5 minutes to draw this. If you are doing that, you're probably overdoing the illustration. If you have made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 circles, about 8 or 10 lines for the carrot and 3, 4 lines for the greens, it's done. Let's move on and let's start drawing the details in pen. Whatever you are making, if the shapes are a little wonky, don't worry about that. You might say that the bowl that contains the berries and the spinach needs to be a perfect circle. It does not. It can be wonky. Everyone enjoys illustration for the joy of the illustration, not for the perfect circles. Okay, now here we have marked the circle in pencil. So when we are making those spinach, baby spinach, draw them like teardrops. Teardrops with stems. That's easy enough to draw, right? And you will overlap just like that as well. Now my line is somewhere over here, so a little bit of it is going to go out. And then very often you can just make a few lines which would look like parts of the leaves. Don't make the same shape over and over again. Try to draw some variant of the shape in different orientations. And even when you're doing something like that, keep looking at that bowl. Now, because you have the pencil line, you can easily complete that bowl, the shape of the bowl, by breaking it up. Make 2 lines for the rim and then continue to fill up as much as you can, but not too much. Then we move to these fruit over here. So you have a nice circular apple. A little to the bottom, you will make a C shape for the dimple in the apple and pull out a stem. The apple on the right has its stem right on the top. So it's just a tiny curved line from the top. Touching this first apple, we have a tomato. It's almost the same size as the apple. Mine is becoming even bigger than the apple. What competition. Now here is a fun part. These tomatoes look like heirloom tomatoes. They have a very interesting squiggly shape for the stalk or the end of the stalk on top. At this point, if you were to just make like a 5-pointed star, it's a wasted opportunity. So take a look at how you can draw this. Make these lines interesting. Make them a little quirky. Some are short, some are bent like that. And the whole thing looks almost like it is Frankenstein's tomato. But it'll look beautiful in the illustration. When all your lines are simple, the few places where you can make the line interesting, you should try to do that. The tomato at the bottom has no such thing. It has just curled up and become very boring. So I am going to exercise my powers as an artist and give it an interesting gap of its own. But in doing that, I have to make sure that I don't repeat the same lines as the first tomato. And then also its shape is not circular. So I'm going to change that as well. Is everyone with me? Do you need a minute? Okay. I'll just come back. Okay, now the bowl of berries, when you're making something that has numerous of the same object, mistake we make is we think we should illustrate all of them. If there are 100 berries over here, we feel that we should be drawing all 100 berries. So no, don't do that. The 100 berries will be represented with color. They don't have to all be drawn. So what we do is, maybe with pencil, you can mark an area inside the bowl which needs to be covered with berries. That is the edge of the cluster of berries. And you can make a few of them along that edge. A nice overlap and a few within. What you should do is give yourself an edge like this where some of the berries are represented, but don't make it like a floral pattern. You will see that some berries are full, some berries are half seen, something like that. And basically just give some kind of shape to the edge. Any more than this? Maybe a few on the top. If you do too many, it just starts looking like there is too much happening over here and not enough in the rest of the illustration. We can do a lot with just this much also. Now for the carrots. First draw the carrots on top. Most fruit and vegetables are very nice to draw freehand because they all have bumpy edges. So you don't have to be worried about really fine lines. So what do we worry about in this case? Look out for the direction of that item and try to maintain the variation in heights, the lengths of the object, how they are placed. Like here we have one carrot placed slightly higher than the one before it, and it goes and hides behind the apple. All these things are making whatever impact needs to be made for the illustration. If I made all of them in one line, the illustration will again look very boring and predictable. Now, in a casual illustration, to make a carrot look like a carrot, you can make few textural lines, which are just a few horizontal lines and just almost like dots, and more numerous towards the shadow side. When it comes to the greens, here again we have a similar problem. Don't draw every stalk. And you can see how the greens have also turned in. So here's the trick that I'm going to tell you about drawing greens, whether it is carrot greens or parsley or coriander. It's a nightmare to try and illustrate all those leaves because they have so many parts to the leaf itself. So my trick is to draw just the outline in clusters of lines like this. So I don't draw the whole leaf, but I draw what part of that leaf can look like. And that too in a few parts, not all over. Keep breaking up those structures. In a few places, there are stalks that are sticking out, so you show those. And this becomes well represented. Now, I don't want to make this too large. It's already going out, I think, outside of my box too much. So overall, I think my box is going to reduce from the top. But this is a call that you can take for your illustration as you start furnishing more details. So I have my apple here. There's the dimple and the stalk sticking out. And here's my tomato. Now at this stage, I can erase all my guidelines, especially the straight lines. Some lines, if they remain, they can actually work better for the illustration. I'm going to make a nice bold outline using a fatter pen. Now here's a tip. Those of you who are not confident about drawing that straight line, if you're trying to draw the straight line holding your pen in this manner, it's going to be difficult. This is how we normally hold our pen. So if you hold it like this and draw a line, you may not get it straight. Try holding the pen sideways. This pen I know has to be held a little more upright. So you hold it upright, but from the side, not like this, but like this. And drag your hand down. Don't move your wrist or your fingers. Just drag your hand down and you should be able to do this. So this part comes right to the end over here. If you don't let it, if your hand slips downward, then your line is going to go to the side. So till wherever you can, let the line come naturally. And if you feel that you're losing grip, just put in your hand or something else over there so you can continue slowly and complete the line. And you will definitely get a much straighter line than the earlier grip or the writing grip. Okay, so already I can see some of my shapes are a little wonky, positions, placement is a little weird. So I will use some correcting over here. I can always increase the density of my carrots. There is, in fact, an extra carrot over here that comes down and bridges the gap between the carrots, tomato, and my apple. So now I don't have to add anything over here. And because after losing the pencil lines, I feel that I need to put in more texture for the leaves. So just so that the illustration makes sense, you can create extra branches of some of the parts of the carrot greens. Is everyone comfortable with your illustration?
Can I show mine for a minute?
Yes, yes. Let's see. I'll see Ritika's first.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. And then Rita, shall I see yours?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So now Rita, this look at the spacing between your objects. So the bowl
Yeah.
has gone really far. You've got this part fine, and then the spinach, the size is a little small and it's got really far. So before you ink, always check whether, and the best way to check is the negative space. How much space do I have between these elements? Because sometimes we're so focused on the shape of the object that we forget to see its size and proportion. So then after you finish the pencil drawing, check with the negative space, how much space do I have left? If I have too much space, that means I might have goofed up on the relative sizes of different objects. Maybe my carrots are too large or too small, my bowl is too large or too small or too far. So before inking, you have the opportunity to change things. Now, just from the point of view of a good composition, we need to put something in the gap between your carrots and your spinach. Okay, you can add a couple of more carrots, but don't add them in the same line because that will become very long. Make them a little higher and pointing towards this direction, maybe not that, because the gap you have is opening out over here. So maybe make a couple more, or you can also make an apple or something in between that bowl and these fruit, because there's a lot of gaps here also. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be my suggestion. It's not for you to make right now, but just so you know, those are the kinds of corrections we can make. Okay. Now, whenever painting fruit, depending upon their color, most fruit and vegetables are warm colored. So it helps to put down a wash of yellow. And we have this base board also, which can be given a shade of maybe blue or yeah, a bluish white would be nice. And then we can give shadows to that. So I just want you to observe what I'm doing first, and then you can start painting your own. Most people would instantly start painting the tomatoes and the focal area. But I'm first going to paint the backdrop, which is going to be yellow and yellowish green over here, yellow over here again, all these yellow, minding the highlights. And this entire section is going to be a blue. So I want you to keep your tools down and just observe. This is a mix of lemon yellow and yellow ochre. So with very brief strokes, leave the highlights on the fruit And keep your colors very loose and flowy. A few highlights and carrots are good. So you can see that I'm not restricting my paint or my color only to the fruit and vegetables. It is flowing into the rest of the background as well. And now right next to this, I'm going to make a backdrop of a very light cobalt blue. And the pigment of that cobalt blue is going to be patchy. In some places, it might go into the yellow. And definitely into blueberries. So don't be afraid of washes. If some of the blue goes into the apple, or the carrot, it's not the end of the world. These colors are so light and often they will become even lighter that you will not even notice. But what they do to the overall magic of the painting is priceless. Okay, now it has to be this fluid, the painting, the colors. Don't bother going back and spreading color in places where you don't see or where you think it's not there. Like, I'm not going to go over here and paint this sliver unnecessarily. Let it be, it's fine. There's a little white patch over here, let it be. Don't be so anal about it that you feel the need to go and cover every patch. There is something happening over here. Let it happen fully. This will always aid our final picture. Okay, do you want to give it a shot? Okay.
Aditi, what is the first color you used? Sorry, I got a call, so I just missed that bit.
This one is
Yeah.
lemon yellow and yellow ochre. But
Okay.
it's not a mix. So I want you to
Acha,
see how I do this. I take a brush which is loaded with water and I literally tap the brush horizontally. So not even upright.
okay.
Because when you put it upright, you get a whole load of paint. It's a very thick amount. But when you just tap this, you skim the surface. So the
Okay.
water just pulls up a small amount of the paint, and then using the same side, I will
Okay.
flatten the brush and paint in
Okay.
strokes like that.
Okay.
So in watercolor, the criminal offense is to try to correct when things are wet. Don't bother. We have the opportunity to layer and layer and layer, and it looks better with layering. Make sure your colors are light and fluid. And in the event that you have so much liquid that it comes to the bottom and starts pooling over here, only in that case should you take a brush which is damp, that's washed and wiped on your rag, and just suck up the excess paint from the bottom. That's all. Don't do anything more. Okay, are you done? By now you should be done. If you are painting any more, you're probably overworking.
I'm just done with the background.
Okay. The trick with illustrating watercolor is to not see individual objects. You see them as layers of colors. So once we have a backdrop made, then we start thinking about what are the next things that we're going to make. And how we work is we start with the widest area and then start narrowing our scope. That way, getting into more and more detail. So, in a situation like that, it's also possible if you want to add shadows even before we come to shadows. Like, for example, I could easily add, when this is wet, I could easily add a shadow maybe here for the bowl. And this is black and cobalt blue. So the lighter shadows can well be added when the paint is still wet. And these magical color blends that happen are just absolutely priceless. Now here I'm just doing it as an experiment, putting this shadow down as an experiment. You can, because it's such a precise stroke, it doesn't rely on anything else blending into it. You can make it even later. But I just want to see what kind of effect I can get in the event that some of this color runs into the object itself. Now here, because the source of light is coming from the top left, the shadow inside the bowl will be on the top left itself. And here it will be along the edge of the fruit. Now let's address the green. Here we'll make a color using lemon yellow, sap green, and yellow ochre. Just a little bit of yellow ochre so that you don't get a very vibrant green. And you can paint it in this fashion. Don't paint it flat, as in don't paint the entire section one green, but paint it in strokes, leaving a few places unpainted or lighter. So I keep changing the grip on my brush so that I can make almost like a textural painting over here, with short lines in various directions. This is again one layer, and we can make more layers as we proceed. But you'll notice that because we have a nice backdrop, the yellow backdrop already provides body. It provides a support or a base onto which now we are painting the green leaves. We don't really need something else. And having it on paper makes it look empty. We don't have that emptiness. More or less the same color with a little more green and maybe a little yellow ochre for the spinach. Again, over here, please refrain from painting an outline on the leaves and then painting the leaf. That is going to make your painting flat. Consider some brush manipulation. Just press the brush down and make a stroke. And the stroke may not cover everything. It might leave a few highlights, a few a little bit of the color may go out. Leave it, keep it like that. Now, even in this case, choosing green over making red or orange first is because there's a larger expanse of green. So I would want to do more layers over there. So I'm just to save time, I've used this order. But there's another thing one can also do is while the yellow is wet, you can also throw in some parts of the green at that point, especially the carrot greens. Now we come to the specific fruit. This is like how we would paint normally. Each of them is given individual attention to paint. So for the carrots, I'm going to show you a trick. Carrots do not have very sharp highlights, though I have made some sharp highlights here. I am taking a color combination of gamboge and orange. So it's not a bright orange yet. And I will paint this in such a way that I will leave a little bit of a highlight on the left of the carrot. And now I'll add a little extra green, orange, while the previous color is wet, and paint a darker orange towards the right. Now this is not done. This is just one part of it. Now here's what I want to do. Just have a look at this. I don't want this very sharp highlight. So I'm going to take a damp brush and just run my brush over that highlight that I made of the carrot. And I get a very nice subtle light. This takes a lot of time and you don't want colors to interfere with each other. So don't do carrots next to each other. Do one on the left, then come and do one on the right. But the process is the same. One thin line on the left, more yellow, more gamboge than orange, and one thin line in the middle with a highlight left behind, and then a deeper orange on the right. Wash your brush, and while the paint is wet, use the damp brush to just go over that highlight to soften the edges. By that time, the first side will have dried, so then you can come and do that all over again. Now I'm going to urge you to not be too fastidious over here. Sometimes a color might run into another color, like mine has also. Don't bother with correcting these little things. It takes away too much, and in the larger scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Are you getting it? Are you getting that nice roundedness on the carrot? So check that you're not using a very fat brush. You don't have too much water or too much pigment. All those things can affect how your carrots will be painted. Quite nice. Now the two other fruit that we have, one is tomato and one is the apples. Tomatoes, not a problem. We can just use a combination of scarlet as the body color. And then to that, you can add burnt umber to create shadow. And that should do the trick now that we have nice white, yellow base.
Sorry, Aditi, can you repeat the color?
Yeah, scarlet and shadows in burnt umber. See here, if you can be careful and dodge the stamen, that's fine. But I'm experimenting. I'm going to go over those not give them too much attention. And as I come to the bottom where there's very little shadow, color, I'm going to insert a little bit of burnt umber while the red of scarlet is still in my brush. I will not wash my brush. So I get a very interesting merge. Here we have 2-3 highlights for, since this is an heirloom tomato, they are ridged. So allow for those ridges. And like we did on the carrot, you can later on even blur the ridges if you feel like it. Add a little bit of burnt umber in sections like these, away from the light. And between burnt umber and scarlet, you can keep moving the brush between these two without washing. And that's a huge asset, because that means that you can continuously paint a color or a variation without having to wash the brush. You get much richer tones like that. The tomato on top has got a dull highlight over here in the middle. So I'm just spreading this color with the damp brush and then there's a very deep shadow, which I'm using burnt umber for. And as I come down, there is an opportunity for me to do some negative painting and accommodate some of the carrot greens into the skin of the tomato itself. This little thing will be a very generous idea and make the rest of the painting look more believable. Now, when it comes to the apple, if we can also go with the same color, but try this one thing out. Use gamboge to paint in this line texture. These are almost like lines of our longitude that go into the dimple of the apple. And then using a combination of scarlet and even a little bit of orange maybe, just repeat some of those lines in the same orientation. Some might be thick, some might be thin. A very light hand should be able to do that trick. Just look at the picture of the apple, and at the specific point that you need to make the line, how does that line appear? Just follow that direction. And here again, before things dry up, you can insert a little bit of a deeper color, a red color in some sections. So the colors for the apple are, start off with gamboge, primarily scarlet, and maybe a hint of orange. That should do it. Okay, I'm going to do these apples later. So moving on to the spinach. Here we'll do two things. One is add a little bit of cobalt blue to this existing green color that we had, and make some shadows underneath the leaves that you've drawn. Like you have a full leaf, make a small patch of shadow underneath or along the outer edge of that leaf. Maybe one manipulated stroke through the center to show the main stem. And then just swaths of color to deepen the depth. Eventually moving to even pure cobalt blue in some sections, in smaller sections. Remember to paint something else or paint something less. And then using our shadow color, the cobalt blue and black mix, definitely make two tones along the edge of that bowl. So here, very carefully paint along the edge of that spinach because we want it to stand out. This is a medium toned gray. It's not very light, but it's not still very dark. Pretty much like we painted the bowl of the berries. You will have some shadow over here. And then on this side, you will have the shadow along the edge of the leaves. That's how shadows work. Now, once it's dry, you will run a thinner line along the edge of the spinach, but it's not the same throughout. In some places, it'll be a fat line. In some places, it'll be a thin line. So then it starts looking like there's depth. So these are very simple go-tos. You don't need to make too many elaborate colors or textures just to show a certain amount of depth in objects like these, which you might land up showing a lot of in a recipe. Using the same technique, we will I'll just show you the darker color here. So it's this plus cobalt blue. So the same thing can be employed to create depth in the carrot greens. Now this time, again now, since it is a second color, second layer, we are going to paint something else and paint something less. So I'm taking broad strokes along certain lines that we've drawn or some we've painted, like the space between these carrots. This will definitely become a deep green or a black color. The space on the or along the edge of fruits. But don't make it, make the edge around it flat. Keep repeating the same texture. Big lines, small lines, thin lines, fat lines. And then at some point you will come to making a dark shadow. These shadows are darkest in the spaces, the small spaces between, but from there they carry on into shadows like these. So then they don't look odd. Otherwise, you would just wonder why is this one shadow looking black? The others are not looking as stark. We need to make these shadows, but the ends of those are also kept not flat, you know. I'm making the shadows with lines. Let me just show you this part. Hopefully it won't blur. So make the edge like that. Don't make it flat. Don't paint it flat. Here, of course, it is ending in a corner, but this way. So this allows for better greenery to be seen as greenery. And of course, the same technique can also be used in trees later on. See, now things have started to literally look up. I hope everyone is doing okay. Okay, so quickly we have one last part. I'm going to address that before we run out of time. And then maybe I can answer your questions also. The berries are going to be first made in a mix of ultramarine blue and a little bit of crimson. Not too much, just a little bit. This color will differentiate them from the bowl. And I'm literally going to, oh, this is too specific. But the first part is to paint a texture around the berries. You can make them in circles if you want. I like to do it that way because it helps me leave those highlights. Or you can do this. You can keep taking a different shade or color, and at least the space around the berries that we've drawn, you can paint it in short strokes so that it fills up. And the short strokes also ensure that you don't cover up every aspect. You will naturally leave out some areas that will become highlights. So I'm moving my brush in small arcs back and forth. I'm carefully avoiding the berries that I've drawn. And once the backdrop is done, then I'm free to just make an outline around the berries that we have drawn very carefully so that you leave a small highlight. Now, every successive layer, you can keep changing the shade just a little bit. Fruit that are identical in every way is, I guess, in my mind at least, it is like Stepford Wives. You can't be identical. There has to be some difference. So some will be darker. The darker ones, of course, you can make them towards the right and also below. In order to make this color even darker, we can add black. And we can create shadows. There. That's it. So not too much. But now in this case, do you notice how making this shadow ahead has allowed us to be much freer in painting the berries than we would have otherwise? Because making the shadow inside the bowl after making all these berries so painstakingly would be a little bit of a stress point. Okay, so at some point I'll finish the apples and I will share the image. Do any of you have any questions, any doubts, anything that I can help you with?
What colors did you use for the berry? The berries, the bowl of berries?
Yeah, the bowl of berries was burnt, no, what am I saying? Crimson and ultramarine blue. And to make it darker, you can use black. So now if you can imagine this as your recipe illustration, you can imagine expanding this to our page proportions and give a backdrop for even that, and then write your recipe over here. It'll look like a beautiful recipe. So this time round, when you're making your illustrations, also consider painting the backdrop a nice shade, something, give yourself something more than just white paper to work with. Okay, so shall we then? Do you all want to shall I share the picture with you? So you can, yeah, let's see what you all. Oh, very nice. Very nice.
I think I still struggle with berries, but I think I will watch again, to observe how you went ahead with berries.
These are good berries, but I think these are very nice. I like the texture. I like the contrast. Very good.
I think when I was doing these carrots, I could assess. I was, slowing down, so it came really well. But when I was doing berries, I somehow was like this,
Oh.
and then I could realize, oh, why the hell I'm going so fast.
Okay. Wow, very nice, Alka. Looking beautiful. Wonderful. Very nice. Your hand has become very light now. Nandini, let's see yours. Good, good.
I don't know what to do with the spinach now, though.
No, it's looking nice. So you have to still make some darker areas around the edge of the spinach. Not for each leaf. That is fine. But just along the edge over here. Wait, let me show you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so this part over here, just along the edge of the silhouette, you can make that part even darker with black.
Okay.
Okay, who else? Who else is holding it up?
Still getting it done, but I have to rush. I have to go pick up
Yeah.
my son. I'll finish this and send a picture.
Very nice, beautiful. Cool. Thanks, Susan. Rita, let's see Rita's. Yeah. Bye, Susan. Very nice. That one carrot made a lot of difference.
Yeah.
It pulled everything together. Good, good. Very nice.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So you can now try the other pictures that I've sent. They're all varied. They have different colors, different compositions, but I want you to use this as an opportunity to study how a variety of elements coming together can make for interesting compositions. Next week, we won't have class because I'm traveling, but I am back the week after that. So next week today is the 2nd. So next week is the 9th. We still will have 4 classes till the 29th, right? The 30th. Last will be the 30th. Okay, cool. So please send me pictures. I'm still available. I'll send you the recording of this. Maybe you can watch it one more time. And give a picture like that. You can give at least another half an hour. So I spent maybe the first 30 minutes just explaining all these parts. But 1.5 hours is a good time to make an illustration about A5 size. So I want you to see that you're not overdoing things. Sometimes when you have the whole day, you think, yeah, I should do a little more, and that can be a problem. So use only that 1.5 hour, 90-minute time limit of our class is perfect to finish an illustration about this size. If you have more elements, then add another 15-20 minutes, but keep your time limited. Don't use up a day, 2 days or whatever. Okay? That way you ensure that ek bar I have stained the paper, it's done. Now I have to move on to the next. I have to move on to the next, like exams. Okay, chalo. I shall see you then next week. No, week after next. Bye-bye.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you. Enjoy your travel. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.